Wait for the red dot. Hello there. Welcome to our hero goalie chat this morning. Welcoming Chris Pearce. Morning, Chris.
Hi, mate. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
So Chris is our new mental skills and performance coach. I think he would probably call it strengths and performance.
Strengths and performance coaching, yeah, but certainly looking at mental skills for what we're talking about, yeah.
And this morning we have a quick chat with Chris and get to know Chris. So if you're watching this live or on playback, either way, you can get to see about Chris and his skill sets and what he's going to be bringing to Hero, but also about the direction we're going to go down using him as part of our business and part of our coaching setup. So Chris, welcome to Hero.
Thanks,
officially.
Mate. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Pleasure to be here.
Now we go back a long way, but we as a company brought you in because we wanted to add a skill set we don't have. And as we've talked about a lot, the mental side of the game is becoming more and more important.
Absolutely.
Especially with young people, but with all goalkeepers, with all sports players and all goalkeepers especially. What's your take on this and you coming into Hero?
Yeah, I think I've always felt throughout sport, not just in hockey, that goalkeeping is such a unique position. Obviously, we're in a team sport, but there's this guy who's at the back or lady, obviously, but someone who's at the back, and if they let the goal in, it's kind of like you could have made 10 saves, but everyone will remember the goal you've let in, etc., etc. There's this kind of stigma attached to being a keeper in that sense. It's your fault. And I think goalkeepers are a different breed in that regard, because I find as a coach, when I'm coaching, a keeper will get hit and someone's melted a ball at them, whatever. And everyone's like, oh, who'd be a keeper? It's just, and the keeper's like, yeah, bring it on, love it, that sort of thing. And I think the mental side of the game, in terms of these long periods where you don't have anything to do. I can remember playing with you. And in fact, no, I was coaching you. And we had a game where you didn't touch the ball till the 68th minute. And you touched the ball twice in the whole game. We won something like 7 or 8-0. And you loved it. And this is what I mean about mentality. For me, I was an outfield player. I would not have enjoyed that, doing nothing for 68 minutes of a game. But you were happy that we won. It was a good team performance. And to me, that's an incredibly different mentality to an outfield player. And I think if you go across all sports, goalkeepers have a different mindset, clearly a different skill set, yet they play such a pivotal role. Without a goalkeeper, you've got nothing, right? Training sessions where I've been a coach and I've not had goalkeepers, disastrous. I need a keeper. So I think it's an incredibly important role that sometimes is taken for granted. And I think the mental side of supporting goalkeepers is something that the generic coach who works with outfield players can really support.
As I always say to goalkeepers, you spend most of your time on your own.
Yeah.
You're the first to get there. You pad up on your own. You do your own walk routine. You do your session. Everyone else is leaving the pitch. You're unpadding, loading up your bag. You're in the goal at training on your own, often without too much guidance. You might get loads of action getting peppered, but goalkeeping could be quite solitary as well.
Completely. I mean, this is part of the thing. I used to be a school teacher as well, and that we're all packing up, and then all the players will just walk off back to the minibus, and then the poor goalkeeper's left behind still trying to pack the bag, and because they're only 13 years of age and they've only played hockey at school, they're not used to packing that bag properly. And there's me rolling my eyes going, come on, let me help you. And I walk all the way back to help this poor child who's on their own whilst everyone else is getting on the bus going, come on, hurry up, and that sort of thing. And I think it's a very solitary role in a team environment. And that's where I'm fascinated by the role of goalkeepers in hockey, in a team sport. And I look for comparisons with cricketers. Cricket is a team sport. Yeah, at any given point, one bowler is running in or one batter is facing a ball. And I find that very intriguing. And I think that individualism within a team sport is incredibly unique. And again, I just think goalkeepers are essential and sometimes undervalued in terms of their importance.
If you play in a team who's got an amazing goalkeeper, you might have that, then you know that a really top goalkeeper is worth their weight in gold. especially in those big games, there's pressure, and they've got to make big saves in big moments to keep your team in the match.
But that's where I'd go back to actually the mental side of the game as well, because for me, I have seen many great goalkeepers, and I have to say the work that Hero are doing and where goalkeeping is in hockey now is insane. As a coach at a couple of clubs, it's really interesting to see how many quality goalkeepers there are. And I would argue now there are almost too many quality goalkeepers at a club to be able to facilitate with matches every week. And I think that comes down to the skill set and the development that goalkeepers are getting from a young age. So you have this kind of depth of goalkeeping, and the skill sets are insane. I mean, if I go back to when I first started playing hockey, ultimately, as I said, I was trying to allude to earlier, if you're in a state where you're happy to go, yeah, hit a hard ball at me, I'll put on some pads. That was it. That was a goalkeeper. Now it is incredibly technical. And my point being is that the other thing that I think plays a massive part, and why I'm very excited to come on board with Hero, is the mental side of the game. What goalkeepers from that individual perspective at the back can offer the entire squad from a mental perspective, from a communication perspective, from a leadership perspective. And on top of skill set, I see that as a really important part of goalkeeping.
Now, I always think if a goalkeeper really understands their position well, to a really high level, they'll take great pride in getting a clean sheet.
Yeah.
They'll take great pride in communicating and preventing the ball getting through. To me, that's a true goalkeeper. Slightly controversial. It's great making saves, but actually there's a big element at high level where you've got to prevent the ball getting through. And the best goalkeepers are the best talkers normally, organising people, getting people lined up, and taking control of that back line. And we've talked about like personality versus mentality. There's normally two types of goalkeeper. There's a goalkeeper who's a bit crazy, quite a strong personality, passionate, life and soul of the party type goalkeeper who is like in the goal. Everyone knows them. They're loud. They're in control. Those like classic kind of wacky goalkeepers. And then there's also the goalkeepers who have to become someone else when they go in the goal, and when they put the helmet on, they've got to effectively leave their personality to one side and become someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And definitely experienced both types as both a player and as a coach. It's quite interesting, the quiet goalkeeper who puts on their pads you don't hear anything from, and then they go on the pitch and their communication to the group is spot on. That's a lovely example of crossing the line, and now put the helmet on, right, this is who I am, this is my role, communicative, and becomes a different person, different animal on the pitch. So yeah, really good example.
Okay, so Chris, what's your style? What are you going to be bringing to Hero? What can we expect from you?
I'm really keen on relationships. Coaching for me is about growing, building the person, and seeing someone grow, in the sense of having a relationship whereby I can work with somebody, but that is an effective relationship because I'm learning about them. So it's not do this, do this, do this. I'm very much about learning about the individual, building that relationship where I understand kind of their mindset, where they're coming from, and finding a path that suits the individual. It's not about, for me, coaching is not about do as I say. It's not autocratic. It's how can I help you be better? Because what works for one goalkeeper, as you were just saying, we have goalkeepers with different personalities, different mindsets. What works for you as an individual is really important. And I think if by building relationships, you can mold a route forward that suits that individual. And I think that's where I really enjoy and hopefully do well in coaching.
You can say it. You excel.
I excel.
You can say it. And that's why we brought you in. We know you excel. And locally, you've got a great reputation. And I think in certain circles, nationally, you've got a great reputation. And hopefully, we can help you and you can help us as we grow. So the big question really is, can mental skills be trained and developed.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have, I taught psychology, sports psychology for many years. I'm not a psychologist, but you don't have to be a psychologist to help individuals use mental techniques that kind of have developed from roots of psychology to help people grow. I actually think, or I know to be true, that many sports performers at all levels, but certainly at the elite level, use sports psychology, use mental techniques to improve their game. I mean, there are many, and hopefully when we go to Swansea, there's going to be, we'll do some presentation work on kind of different ideas, because of course there are many, and again, it needs to suit the individual. But a simple idea would be something like using imagery. Seeing a save before you make it, before you make it physically. So in your mind, just working through, okay, the attacker is here. He's going to shoot from that position. This is where I am. This is where I'm balanced. This is, my head going over the ball. This is me completing the save, but mentally. And there's evidence of how using mental rehearsal and imagery techniques that fires neurons in the brain, neurons that would go to your muscles, and actually without completing those movements, what you're doing is, if you can use imagery effectively, what it does is improve your reaction time, because if you're constantly seeing yourself making saves, it's firing those neurons in your brain that just let those muscles know that this is the movements you've been making. Yeah. And it's effective. There's evidence of it being effective. And I think, again, if you talk about the individual, it might be, you talked about personality earlier. So you might have someone who is really calm under duress in moments of adversity. If I can put adversity on, I always want to put adversity in the sporting context. There is adversity which is life-threatening, etc. So I always make it clear that I'm talking about in the sporting context. Yeah. But when some people react in terms of adversity on the pitch in a very calm fashion, and others will get upset, agitated, frustrated, etc. I don't know if you know anyone who used to be like that, kid. but if you can, but for those individuals, even things like deep breathing techniques and so on, or ways where you find a way to snap out of it. There's a really simple one that golfers use, for example, and maybe in other sports, you put a tight elastic band around your wrist and you pull on that, and it creates a little sharp moment that kind of makes you click and kind of reset your kind of emotions, as it were. So yes, to keep it simple, yes, there are many things that can be done in terms of understanding how you can improve your mindset in terms of mental skills.
So goalkeepers particularly use mental resets at the top level.
Yeah.
So Maddie Hinch has got a classic reset of, after a goal, you see her go behind the goal, takes the helmet off, has to go out of water, and then on the bottle, she's got these little words of motivation.
That's right.
And you'll see that every time a goal goes in with her. And I think you talked about the growth of goalkeeping. To be fair, Maddie Hinch has played, and especially in this country, an enormous role in making goalkeeping cool, especially young girls, but young people now want to be goalkeepers.
Absolutely.
She's made it trendy since the gold medal in Rio. And I think, hats off to Maddie, because, I've worked with her and been coached, or worked with her, coached next to her, watched her inspire. Like, she's done an incredible job at inspiring the next generation of goalkeepers.
Can I just say as well, what I really like, bear with me on this, but for me, there's a bit of a parallel between what Maddie did in 2016 and what Johnny Wilkinson did for the England Rugby Union team in 2003. So I was a school teacher at the time, and after 2003, when Johnny Wilkinson did the drop goal, obviously his technique was this, when he was taking his kicks and doing all this. And I remember going back to school, every kid, it's like, I can kick, and they were all copying the Johnny Wilkinson way, not really knowing why, but they'd seen it on TV. And I just thought there was an incredible, going back to Maddie, I thought there was an incredible surge of young goalkeepers with water bottles with tape on their bottles, like, not really knowing why they're doing it, but putting all the tape on and stuff. And it's great, because to have those icons, those role models that people want to follow. But then if we can get some understanding behind that, because at the end of the day, you're watching Maddie Hinch be amazing in the Olympics and so on and on the shuffles. But what's behind that? Why is she so good at what she does? And one of the things you're alluding to on top of her skill set is the mental side of her game.
And Ollie Payne, actually, we're lucky because in this country, Ollie Payne, already one of the best in the world. In the next 18 months, will very likely be the best goalkeeper in the world. And he is uber calm, so laid back, very relaxed, and nothing flusters him at all. And he's quite unique. He takes that into the game. He's pretty unflappable mentally, and because of that, he's able to perform at a really high level. In his first Olympic Games, came in and just absolutely smashed it in Tokyo. So he is a rare breed. So moving on slightly, then we talked about developing mental skills, and in Hero, one of the big things that we're going to use Chris for is to be working the pitch at camps and making time to get round and speak to people individually, as well as presenting during the day to groups. So, building on the technical work and the training on the pitch, a great sort of addition to that day or that experience will be having time with Chris to talk about your own mental state. It may well be that people have issues off the pitch, which sometimes follow them onto the pitch and they can't quite separate the two.
Absolutely.
It also might be about managing pressure, especially if you're a performance goalkeeper or a first 11 goalkeeper. And it might just be mentality, adapting your mentality and maximising all of your assets to become the best version of you.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, which I'm a big fan of, as you know.
Exactly. So, who are some of the best examples of players you've coached with or played with or met in hockey? Like, why are they, you haven't got to name them, by the way, but who are the best examples and why are they so mentally successful?
Goalkeepers or just across the board?
Either or.
Yeah, across the board.
Yeah.
There's a goalkeeper at one of the clubs I coach at currently who enjoys goalkeeping so much that just loves making saves, loves being involved, communicating with the team, wants players to be the best versions of themselves that they can, so supports them from that perspective. And then when he's called upon, just loves making saves. But I've never seen him upset, frustrated, angry. A bit like you're describing with Ollie Payne, whereby if he lets one in, what's next? On to the next one, on to the next one. And I think what's really interesting with him is he makes insane saves in training. But again, a really unique point about goalkeeping and what will happen and what does happen at Hero goalkeeper camps is that goalkeepers get save. It's very action-packed, lots going on. Of course, there's all the coaching element and so on that keeps keepers really, really busy. And yet, on a training session for a team on a Wednesday night or whatever it is, there might be periods of time where you get very little to do in terms of actually physically making saves. Or on a match day, as I described with you earlier, when you didn't touch the ball to the 68th minute, you still had a role to play, but in terms of the skill set, not getting to do anything. And I see some goalkeepers who will get very frustrated with that. This guy is not like that. His name's Matt. And he just loves it, just loves being a part of it. And when he gets an opportunity to be involved, whether he's successful, partly successful, or on that individual occasion isn't successful, same mentality, get up, what's next, just loves being there. So that's one example. I'm fortunate enough to coach the county men and I've done masters stuff and so on. I can think of a number of outfield players, and I don't want to name drop at all. That's not what
Do it. We love a name drop.
No, I know you do. Well, I don't really want to name names.
You're going to say Simon Mason, aren't you?
Well, Simon Mason's a really interesting example because obviously he's one of the greatest goalkeepers Britain's ever produced, and yet
No doubt.
I've not worked with him, been with him in a goalkeeping capacity. He actually played on pitch for Masters. But a fantastic example of someone who communicates in a way that people can understand. I think
that's how he commentates, isn't it?
I think
he commentates like that. Simon Mason commentates in a way where he explains so clearly that a complete non-hockey follower can follow the game and understand it.
And that's the skill of language as well. And I think goalkeepers have a huge part to play in the skill of language.
Oi!
Well, yeah, you definitely use
Get back in.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. But it's that. But if you use the right word, because it's interpretation of words. So it might be drop. If someone just says drop, well, what do they mean by drop? Do they mean drop to your man? Yeah, where do you want me to go? So that one word wouldn't be enough. And actually, with Mace, he's
Mace.
Sorry. when he's on the pitch, he's just. But he'll call it early as well because of his goalkeeping background and experience and skills. The ball will be 60, 70 yards away, and he's already calling what's happening. Yeah. So teammates already know, and that's a huge thing for goalkeepers to know.
On that point, best time to communicate is when your team have the ball. Get your team set up, and I always think when you're in goal and your team have the ball at the other end, the question I love to pose to goalkeepers is, if your team lose the ball right in this second, are you set up? Are you in good shape to counter cover or be in some form of defensive shape? So many goalkeepers wait till possession is lost, or even lower down, gets in a dangerous position in the 25, then start to panic call. The best time to communicate is when the ball's at the other end. When your team have possession, get your, for example, fullbacks, one's got up, one tucked in, get yourself set up so that at any moment, goalkeepers be thinking, if we lose the ball right now, what shape are we in? And that's my mentality, even with the teams that I coach or when coaching goalkeepers at all levels. If we lose the ball right now, what shape are we in? And I think really the higher up the pitch you can do that, you're giving your defenders and team more time to actually react and follow your instruction.
Can I add to that as well? It can be for any goalkeeper, but particularly with young goalkeepers. As I say, I used to be a teacher, so I've worked with many, many young goalkeepers over many years. And there can be a lack of understanding sometimes about what your role is when the ball is all the way down the other end. And actually, you'll see some young goalkeeper, it becomes a spectator sport, right? Which is actually the worst thing I think you can do. And just
you're
watch.
In the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't watch it. You're part of it.
I say all the time, and I say this to outfield players, there's 22 players on a hockey pitch. Only one player is touching the ball at any given point. What are the other 21 doing? And that absolutely includes the keepers. And I've seen keepers, they'll go and sit on the backboards and just sit there and watch the game, or, they'll turn around and actually are getting their drinks bottle. Like you said earlier about Maddie, she's done it after a goal's gone in before the ball goes back to the halfway line. Those sort of things go on. And actually the impact of a goalkeeper in those moments when the ball is all the way down the other end, as you said, even when your own team is in possession, is so, so important. So important.
And as you get to a higher level and performance, so for me, and performance is a really overused word in hockey, especially. Every summer there's a performance camp somewhere. True performance for me is performance centre, nags, first and second level for me. Performance levels, it does change. So, for example, if we're coaching performance goalkeepers, it will be slower paced training and there'll be a bigger gap between balls, because at a performance level, you don't get 50 shots. You might get 10 in the game. You might get 5 in the game. And actually understanding the game at a high level is as important as actually making the save. And that relates to calling defenders. At a high level, you can't really call defenders unless you understand their role. If you understand the setup of the team, for example, you might be playing zone or man-to-man. As a goal, you've got to understand the team approach to actually be calling the right thing. You agree with that?
I totally agree with that, yeah.
And that's a bit less of an issue with junior goalkeepers and age groups. But even at age groups, they might have a style of play, man-to-man or zone. I think with junior hockey, predominantly looks like it's man-to-man style hockey, where the goalie sees a player, tries to get everyone tagged up and marked. Then I think as you go up, with things like zone defence, you just need to understand what the team's doing so you can actually call the right thing.
And one thing that I find interesting, and I'd love goalkeepers to be able to answer, and it might be a question I ask in Swansea.
Oh, Rob Allen's online. Rob Allen.
Robbie A. All right. How many goalkeepers are actually asked? So when you take a break in training with whatever's going on, it might be a shooting drill, but it's more like, I'm thinking more in terms of gameplay drills, maybe 4v3, overload, underload drills, whatever. When you take a break and you get the players to come together and discuss what's going on, how many times does the goalkeeper lead that conversation? Or do goalkeepers, I'm interested, do goalkeepers, as I say, I really want to ask this question in Swansea, when players are called in.
Ask it now.
Well,
several people online now.
Okay. Well, do you as a goalkeeper, when we're called in, the whistle goes, called in to talk about what's going on in this gameplay scenario, is the goalkeeper just getting a drink and maybe talking to their other goalkeeper? There might be two of you at a goal, or are you actually called into the huddle and do you just listen, or do you get the opportunity? Because the thing that I've learned in recent years, and I try and do more of, is when you call into the huddle, the goalkeeper speaks. I too often hear the captain or a pivotal player in the team talk about what's going on with the organisation defensively, and yet that should start with the guy right at the back who can see absolutely everything and give their opinion. And I'm doing this a lot more with Canterbury ladies, and it's really interesting to get. We have as many as 4 goalkeepers at training and get them involved. And actually, sometimes we call in. It's only the goalkeepers who give feedback to the players. The players are given a kind of a chance to respond in terms of understanding the language used or the point being made, but actually we'll take on board the points that the goalkeepers are making, because I think they're in the best position on the pitch to be able to call what's happening organisational-wise. And I think that's, do goalkeepers get the opportunity to contribute in that regard? Because they absolutely should.
Well, that is why goalkeepers make great coaches, first of all. And actually, good umpires often are goalkeepers. Because you understand the game. And as a goalkeeper, you spend so much time watching, although you're part of it, you watch a lot of hockey. You learn. I think growing up, I was learning about positions and who did what and what good structural play looks like.
I would argue as well, many goalkeepers that I've come across are surprisingly good on pitch. And I only say surprisingly from the perspective of you don't see it, but it comes down to observational learning. And as the goalkeeper, because you can see so much, and actually, even if you make 10, 20 saves in a game, if you add up the time you're involved compared to the time you're not involved, there is significantly more time in a game where you're not actually physically involved than you are involved. And actually, it's during those moments where you can absorb so much information. And that's why goalkeepers, when they do go out on pitch, stick the shin pads on and have a go, they have learned so much just from watching. And, the power of that in terms of zonal presses and man-to-man and different styles of defending that goalkeepers can pick up on. They are the Bible, if you like, for knowledge in terms of how to structure. And there's so much goalkeepers can offer in that regard.
Couldn't agree more, Chris. Well said. Well said. You're slowly coming around, aren't you?
Well, I've had to meet other people rather than you to be convinced, mate. But yeah, no, absolutely. As I say, it genuinely goes back to a point for me. When I first picked up a hockey stick, it was who's mad enough to go in goal. I was at school. Who's mad enough to go? I don't know if anyone knows Jackie Baker's in Ramsgate in Kent. But
cold place.
Oh, my goodness, a cold place. And I genuinely can remember doing hockey in my games lesson in the snow. And, we were frozen. But then some poor person had to put on the hockey goalie kit. So who's mad enough to put the kit on, go and stand there and have balls hit at them very badly, mind. But it's that, that concept of what is the role of the goalkeeper? And it has changed so much. And as we alluded to earlier, the skill sets of goalkeepers are insane compared to when I first started. And I'm talking about 11, 12-year-olds, the skill sets that I see there. So that's really important. So we've got the skill set, but again, this mental side of the game. And that's why I'm excited to come on board and chat more about it.
Let's touch on one of our last points, self-coaching. Something I'm always, really hammering home to goalkeepers that we work with Hero. As a goalie, you have to be able to self-coach. You spend a lot of time on your own, as we've already said. You need to know really how you're playing. You got to be self-aware of goals or instances you feel like you might have done better with. you need to understand when a good time to unpick that might be. So a lot of young goalies I meet are reflecting on things that have happened, and the game's it's still going on. And trying to park things and then revisiting them. And I've been really promoting the old school training diary with goalies that I've come across. I remember as an England schoolboy being told to do a training diary and writing down, when you trained, goals that you let in, how you felt about it. And then you get to Christmas in the season and you look back through your book, you might have a pattern of goals on your left foot, for example. You can have a look at how you felt with your emotions. And it's really actually a helpful tool. And I've recently gone back to promoting that with goalkeepers, especially goalkeepers who are breaking into sort of NAGs, England junior teams. It's a really important thing to understand, like, A, how you're playing, B, how good is your self-analysis, because some people think they're playing really well all the time, and they're probably not. Some people don't maybe have the open-mindedness to think where they could have improved. And a training diary is a really healthy thing to do to help you reflect and learn with.
Yeah, and go back to what we started talking about today, is that's why I love building relationship with players, because if a player can bring to our conversation where they feel they're at because they've gone through that element of self-coaching, that's really powerful, because real development, success, progress comes from the player themselves. The goalkeeper needs to lead that process. My job, your job is to guide that process and help people grow. So, as you say, if somebody notices that they've conceded 6 goals in the first half of the season on their left foot, that they feel they can...
Or through their legs, that's always my issue.
Well, near post through the legs. I do remember 1 or 2, but not many, but there were 1 or 2. On a bad day, but interestingly, on a bad day, there's one day that you and I have always talked about when you were playing, whereby you just had a bad day and your confidence was reasonably low going into it, because it was a certain team on a certain pitch with a certain penalty corner routine. So actually, and probably as the coach, I didn't help that scenario by trying to change your mindset before going into that game. But because it then happened once, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy whereby you felt you couldn't cope with that, and they exploited it again and again and again. But we've talked about that a lot. But this is the point. You knew that going in. You'd done some self-coaching. You knew what the problem was. Yeah. What we didn't do effectively between us, and we're going back a few years now, didn't come up with strategies and ways to work on that.
But I think it's all evolved now, isn't it?
Of course,
the game and how we think about it has evolved. And actually, the game of hockey evolves every year now. With self-pass, long corners, going back longer, offside, goalkeeping kit, composite sticks. The game is evolving every year. It gets quicker every year now, the game. And actually, that does make goalkeeping harder.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
And actually, I think now, as you said earlier, there's so much available for goalkeepers that wasn't there 10 years ago.
Completely. Can I bring another point in as well? You were just saying there about self-coaching and coming up with things that you can work on. I'd also go back to personality, which is something you brought in earlier, right near the beginning of the conversation. Because once you do that self-coaching, you might have a diary, as you described as an example. But then when what am I going to do with that? You'll get some goalkeepers, I would argue, and again, very happy to have these conversations with individuals, but I would argue there are some goalkeepers who may have made a mistake on a match day on a Saturday, who then the following week want to address that specifically and go, okay, this happened. I want the shots from that area of the D because that's where the goal was conceded. This is what happened. I want some repetition there. But you'll also find other goalkeepers who, okay, I made a mistake. I just want to go back to my process. I want to go through my normal warm-up drills. I want to go through this, and I just want to go through my normal processes and so on. But I think that comes down to the individual. So again, going back to self-coaching, it's really important that takes place. But then building that relationship with the coach, finding the best way forward for that individual goalkeeper to help them kind of progress and move on.
Good point. Because sometimes you don't want to make a really big deal of something if it's happened once, for example. There's also an element of over-analysing, isn't there?
Yeah, it happens. I mean, at the end of the day, the other thing I think sometimes gets forgotten is what is the goal? What is the objective? Sorry, clearly I've just given it away. What is the objective of hockey? to win.
Scoring a goal,
Scoring goals. You can't win a game unless you score. Now, of course, there's the, well, if we don't concede, we have a better chance of winning. But the simple objective is you cannot win a game, you cannot get 3 points unless you score goals. And obviously, teams will come up with strategies to do that. Look at penalty corners, for example. It's immediately overloaded to 4 plus the goalkeeper against very commonly 7, sometimes 8. Even if it's only 6 or 5, it's still an overload. So goals are going to be conceded. It's that simple. It's the nature of the
game. And I think, as you always say, that there's other people involved in this equation. It's not always the goal. A lot of goalies want to save everything, and I think I was one of those. But there's another team, there's an opposition who have their own plans, and they might execute. They might get it right on the day. Penalty corners, especially, if a team nail their routine, invariably they're going to score. And there's so many variables as a goalkeeper we can't control. Umpires, defensive mistakes, poor marking. Your team might not have a good day and they might not turn up. If your team don't turn up as a goalkeeper, you're highly likely to ship goals. Because, you are at the mercy of your team in some ways. So there's so many variables that are out of the goalkeeper's control. But as I always say when we're coaching goalkeepers, and I remember Simon Triggs, Canterbury and GB goalkeeper that I played under a lot, like at Canterbury, he would always say, what can you control? I can control having my hands up. I can control getting set. I can control watching the ball. I can control communication with my defence. And actually, if you just made a little list and tick them off mentally, I've done that, tick, I've done that, tick, I've done that, tick. There are a large number of things that you can control, and there's a large number of things that are going to prevent you from either making mistakes or give you a really good chance of making saves.
One thing we haven't said in that summary, which does have to come into the play, because ultimately we've attributed goals being conceded to other factors. The other point is goalkeepers do make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And again, as we know, and it's very commonly discussed, if you're a striker, a midfielder, or a defender, you can make a mistake and it's very quickly lost in the ether because it didn't amount to anything or you had a chance to recover. I would have done with my defensive ability, but there would have been times, for example, where I may have dived in, been beaten, but then with my pace, Keir, I was able to then get back round and recover. As a goalkeeper, you can make a mistake and it might be 10, 15, 20 minutes before you get a chance to do anything about it. That's why, something you said earlier, you kind of have to park that and move on to the next thing. And that's a lot of what the mental skills side of it is as well. And particularly with young goalkeepers, but any goalkeeper who beats themselves up over, in inverted commas, beats themselves up over a mistake that's made, everybody makes mistakes.
That is a big reason why I believe a lot of goalies get better with age.
Experience, yeah.
And actually, Rob Allen, a good example, who's someone who's got a lot better as he's got older.
He's playing very, very
He's
well.
Mentally stable. He's not overanalyzing. He's got really good basics. He's really good athlete. And actually, on top of that, if you bolt on the confidence, the experience, and that kind of like just stable thinking where he's a bit older, he's not going to get flustered by stuff, And I think Rob and loads of other goalkeepers. And in football, we've seen, haven't we, like Brad Friedel, Peter Shilton. There's loads of goalies who are really, really almost get better as they get older because their mindset is just strong. They've almost like been there, done it, seen it. So they're not going to get panicked by a mistake because they're pretty stable in their thinking, But
I would argue the best sports performers at elite level or otherwise are those who are mentally strong and can stay calm in the moment. Forgive me, you're going to laugh at me now because it's not goalkeeping and it's not hockey, but there's been something in the news recently about Harry Kane after missing that penalty for England in the quarterfinals. How would he react? And he's just, they talk about in the media, they love talking about how, that could destroy their confidence. The media almost want things to destroy people's confidence sometimes, but it might destroy their confidence or whatever. And yet he is someone who, next job. And I think anybody in the world of sport, if you can go, whatever's happened is happened, park it find a way to maybe deal with it, improve upon it. But ultimately, what's the next job? What's the next job? And I think for goalkeepers, going back to goalkeepers, that's a huge part of it. You can concede a goal from a really poor goalkeeping mistake and your team go 1-0 down. And yet 55 minutes later, you're 2-1 up and you make an absolute worldie save that gets your team the win. You need to be in the right mental state for that save to be made at the end of the game. If you're still dwelling on that mistake that put your team 1-0 down, you might not make that save. So it's that kind of thing.
Fantastic. Well, we've been talking for 50 odd minutes.
Have we?
That went quick, didn't it?
Goes quickly, yeah, it's really enjoyable.
For the many people that are online today, thanks for coming on. This chat will be live on our Facebook page for 3 weeks. You can revisit it and have a look. I'm sure I might have a look at it again just to play it back and to see how interesting Chris has been.
Yeah, right.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the second half of the hockey season. With regards to Hero, things coming up. So we're going to be in Swansea on the 8th of January. We're taking a strong team up there for a sellout goalkeeper camp. Really excited. How do you feel about that, Chris?
Yeah, really excited. Yeah, really looking forward to the long drive to Swansea, but I'm very much looking forward to building relationships, meeting many goalkeepers and seeing what they're about, where they're at in terms of kind of the mental side of their game and having conversations and seeing where we go from there.
And then in January, we're also starting our subscription service at Braintree, Folkestone and Marden. So we've got 3 different venues launching, and they're also really well attended, and we've got people booked up and paid for that. And then one-to-ones will continue throughout the season. For your second half of the season, good luck with your hockey, good luck with your goalkeeping, and anything you need goalkeeper-wise, just drop us a line. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Chris.
Happy New Year, everyone.